Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me on another of my interview series. Today we are asking the question, is the British economy about to collapse? There's a lot of news and a bit of tension about the banking, the potential financial collapse, and what would happen if that did occur. Well, I've asked Justin Walker to come back because we have somewhat an alert to discuss. Justin, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Hello, and I apologise to all your viewers if they're getting sick to death of seeing me.
Not
But
at all. I'm sure
uh,
they love seeing you.
uh, it is a very serious subject. I was due to come on to your programme in about another 2 weeks' time, but because of what's happening, I would view this as an alert because we have information that we know is extremely important, information that can save the British economy from collapse if there's a global collapse happening. And the signs don't look good at the moment. And we'll perhaps discuss that in a moment. But we have a lot of information to give to your viewers, information that's come from the behind the scenes, from insiders. And that's the key. This is not my research or anyone else's research. This is very much information that's come from insiders within the City of London who want the truth out.
Right.
And we know the MPs don't want to touch it with a barge pole. They just do not want to go there.
Is it because it's
And
too sensitive?
because he will, if this fiscal mechanism is triggered, it will completely upset the criminal globalists, and they will not be able to pursue their central bank digital currencies, their social credit scheme. In other words, assembling the technocracy that we're seeing being rolled out in China.
Yes.
The Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, these globalists have got their plan of action, and this one fiscal arrangement will completely scupper their plans.
So let's
That's
just
how
just
serious
just
it is.
right. With a financial collapse, we could be going into the thing we've been talking about for some time and slightly worried about, the central bank digital currency, which is a programmable currency, which of course could mean the limits on people's spending ability,
Oh
or
yeah,
indeed
coupled, yeah,
the ability that you have to
yeah,
spend it
coupled
before it exposes.
coupled with carbon credits and all the other ways. And you've only got to look to China at the social credit system. But if you disagree with the Chinese Communist Party and you start to sort of be a bit awkward, they can get at you because they control the amount of money you get. They will look at your habits,
Yeah.
your spending, how you spend your money, how awkward you are. Have you been rude to a policeman, or have you been rude to a government servant? Whatever it is, and you might suddenly find you can't travel or you can't buy something. I mean, this is how awful it is, and
Yeah.
that's happening in China. There's no conspiracy theory. It's
It's
happening.
there, and people can see that
Yeah.
in action. So there is an alternative method that can be implemented extremely quickly that nobody wants to talk about, but could save the economy, and it's happened before. Is that my understanding correct?
Right. I'm going to sound like that chap. I can't remember his name now. In the '60s, he said, let me tell you a story."
Oh yes,
Yes, who was it? I'm trying to think who he was.
yes, that's right. I know
Yes,
exactly what you mean, and
and
it's
I can see him, but I
I want to
can't
tell you a story.
name him. Anyway, let me tell your viewers a story. Some may have already heard this story, but
Yes.
I'm going to tell it anyway because I think it's important they see where it's all coming from.
Okay.
My late uncle was Sir Harry Pilkington, later became the Lord Pilkington of St Helens. Now, in 1954, he attended the very first Bilderberg conference at the Hotel Bilderberg. In 1955, he became a director of the Bank of England, a position he held until 1972. Now, he told me some things, and I must emphasize right from the word go, he may have had globalist leanings, but he was a wonderful man, lovely man, very eccentric, very generous, and we all loved him to bits. So he's not an evil person or anything like that. He was a lovely man. And he told my father once, quite simply, that if you are investing large amounts of money, and he said millions, which
Hmm.
today would be billions, if you're investing large amounts of money in a country where you're not sure about the government and you're not sure about your investment, whether they'll leave it alone, encourage it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So they said that is how they justified involving themselves in the governing of that country because they were protecting their investments. And there's a sort of crude logic. But of course, when you look at what's happening today in the world, you realize very quickly that it's all about control. And what's happening in China, what we
Yeah.
described, they're trying to impose it upon all of us. So the globalists, if you like, have changed tack. They're no longer, shall we say, semi-attractive. They're now pretty hideous and pretty evil.
Right.
So going back to my uncle, and because of that, I was on a train once going back to school, and he confirmed what we now all suspect. He actually said to me, he asked me what I was going to do for a career, and we were chatting, and he suddenly stopped. And he said, "Look, I'm going to give you two bits of advice to take through life." He
Yeah.
said, "Never ever believe anything you read in the press because we control it. Never believe anything you read in the papers. We control it. And never, ever believe a politician when they say they can do something. They can't unless we say they can."
Mm.
Now, to a 16-year-old, that went straight over my head, and I wasn't really too sure what he was talking about, but I certainly remember the conversation.
Yes.
Moving on, he often did talk about banking and money and what have you, but the key one was really, um, as I said, it was later on after he died. He died in 1983, so we're going, it's a long time
Yes.
ago. But I started to take an interest in politics and everything else, and I started to wonder about how money was created and by whom, and it did sort of fascinate me. And I came across a lady researcher called Ellen Brown. She's a U.S. attorney. She's a
Mm.
lovely lady, Ellen Brown, Ellen, Ellen Brown, and she wrote about the greenback dollar, the how in the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, when faced with financial oblivion and joined the Civil War, one of his advisors said, "Well, look, why can't you just simply create paper money based on the credibility of the U.S. government? In other words, on the wealth and the potential of the U.S. government of the North." And they did. And it was a greenback dollar. It was debt-free, interest-free, and it was somewhat familiar with the colonial script that the colonists were producing in the 1740s, 1750s. This was debt-free, interest-free money, again based on the wealth and labor potential of an individual state. And that was the real reason why the American War of Independence happened, because the City of London and the bankers didn't like the colonists producing and creating their own money to basically create wealth for themselves.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So
Because our ordinary, the normal fiat currency that we have at the moment, that's in circulation, that we think that we've had forever, is debt based. But the greenback was credit based.
yeah, and this is what conventional economists will tell you. No, it can't be. No, it's fiat money. No, it is based on something tangible.
Right.
It
So
works.
that was then. But
Yeah.
here we are with this potential financial collapse, and the excuse is to go to the central bank
Well,
digital currency.
let me tell you the story. So, dear old Abraham Lincoln did this, and it worked a treat. The greenback dollar worked a treat. Everyone was happy. Now, I thought, well, if that worked in the 1860s, why couldn't we have a greenback pound? So I wrote an article for the UK column, which in those days was a newspaper, not the media program we have now. And they published it. And one night in September 2012, the phone went. And my wife was in the kitchen. My daughter was doing her homework. And I thought, oh God, I've got to go and answer this. And it'll probably be one of my wife's friends, in which case I'm going to end up in the kitchen keeping an eye on everything while she has a good old chat. So I picked up the phone, and a very, very posh voice said, "Oh, hello, is that Justin Walker?" And I went, "Well, it might be," jokingly. And he said, "Let me put your mind at rest. Are you the nephew of the late Sir Harry Pilkington?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Marvelous," he said. "I'm ringing on behalf of my father. He's not long for this world, but he was a fellow director at the Bank of England with your uncle. And he's read your article in the UK column." I said, "Oh, right." He said, "Now, my father just wants to give you one word, just one word." And I was panicking by this time because my laptop was closed, and I realized there was no paper, no pen by the phone.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh God, I'm not going to be able to remember this. So as he was about to say it, I blew on the window, and then he said, "Bradbury, will you please remember the word Bradbury?" So I scribbled Bradbury on the thing. And he said, "Now, if you research the Bradbury, you will find a solution to all of Britain's economic woes. So please do this. Now, you can't trace this call and you don't know who we are, but we wish you well and we hope you succeed. And with that, he said goodbye. I immediately 1471, number withheld. So I blew on the window again. I thought, oh my God, Bradbury. And by that time, my laptop had finally decided to work. So I fed in the word Bradbury. And first one came up was Julia Bradbury, you know, the lady who struts around disused railway lines and stuff. And I thought, well, she's not going to save the British economy. So I then looked again and then got Bradbury, the one who wrote the Martian Chronicles. I thought, well, that's not going to help. And eventually, as I started trolling around, I started to see treasury notes signed with Bradbury, and they were being sold by stamp dealers and coin dealers. And as I started to think, well, what are these treasury notes? I then came across a site by a gentleman called Thomas Johnston. And I think you've got his face. I think you've got his picture there.
Yes, let me see if I can find that. Hang on a minute.
He's a nice, jovial looking. Well, he's jovial, but he's a nice chap sitting at his. There he is.
There he is.
Now, this is Thomas Johnston, MP, and he was a Privy Councillor, and during Churchill's wartime government, he was responsible for looking after Scotland. He was also the father of the Scottish hydroelectric scheme. And what is interesting is nobody seemed to have a bad word to say against him. All political parties, both sides of the House, seemed to appreciate that he was a good man, and he hated corruption. And he wrote a book called The Financiers and the Nation. And this book, in chapter 6, is entitled Usury and the Great War. And here he describes a story of what has become known as the Bradbury Pound. And the story is this. At the outbreak of the First World War in August 1914, August 4th, 1914, the entire British economy was on the gold standard. And the Bank of England, a private bank, nothing whatsoever to do with the Treasury, a private bank that was creating pound notes, £1 and £5. And by the way, a pound in 1914, and this shows you about inflation, a pound in 1914 is now the equivalent, I looked it up today, £147. So £1 in 1914 would give you £147 today.
Great.
So it's gone right up. Anyway, the point is, the Bank of England had been committing fraud, essentially, because they were creating money out of thin air. And I think you've got the gentleman who started the Bank of England there, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's have a look. Hang on, bear with me.
You can see the original quote given, which I think is fantastic.
Right, so let's have a look.
Goodbye, Thomas. And now we've got this fellow.
And what's his name?
Paterson, P-A-T-E-R-S, Peter, Sir William Paterson. I've got it written down, my crib note. There you are, Sir William Paterson.
So
and he made a fortune out of slavery and buccaneering. He was a co-founder of the Bank of England, but this is the wonderful quote, and it's a genuine quote. The bank, i.e. the Bank of England, the bank have benefit of interest on all monies, which it creates out of nothing. So right from the beginning, in 1694, when the Bank of England emerged, and so did the national debt, so our national debt emerged at that time as well. So here they are, admitting they're creating the money out of thin air. So in 1914, they've been creating so many of these notes, paper notes, £5 notes, whatever, and they didn't have the gold to underpin it. They didn't have the gold to back it up in their vaults. The Bank of England did not have enough gold to back up. Many times more notes have been created than they actually had gold in the vaults. And people, quite understandably, at the outbreak of the First World War, a global war, they weren't sure how it was going to go, realized that paper money can be devalued just like that. But gold has a better chance, and gold is something physical and tangible. So they started queuing up, and I think you've got a picture of the queue there, haven't you?
I have, yeah, queuing up. Hang on, let's find it. Here it is.
There we are. And here they are in 1914, a lot of young men. And I looked at that picture only this afternoon, having not seen it for a few weeks. I looked at that and I thought, I wonder how many of those men survived the First World War. And you know what the death rate was. It was, quite, Anyway, they were queuing up saying, we want gold. We want to swap our £1 notes and £5 notes. We want to have gold sovereigns and half sovereigns. So they were queuing up to want their gold. And of course, the Bank of England and, of course, all the commercial high street banks didn't have that gold. So the Walter Cunliffe, the governor of the Bank of England, and a lot of the City of London cronies went running around to the Treasury to meet with David Lloyd George, who at that time was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And he said, look, you've got to save us, because unlike today, where the bank collapse is contrived, and we can go on about that later on, it's deliberate. Here, they genuinely wrong-footed themselves because they didn't have a fallback position.
Right.
So they really had made a bit of a focal objects of the whole enterprise. So David Lloyd George says, well, okay, not to panic. We'll get a bill through Parliament quickly, and we'll authorize the Treasury to create debt-free and interest-free money that's based on the wealth and the credit and the labour potential, the creativity of the nation. So they got a bill through Parliament in 2 days.
Blimey.
I know, they rushed it through, wartime, and I've read Hansard. You can read it, and it's quite weird. You're reading. It's like listening to politicians all that long time, because every word is recorded, and you read it, and it sends a bit of a chill down your spine, actually, when you read these things. And I think you've got the picture of the notes now. Have you got some notes?
Yes, I have. Bear with me. So that's them queuing.
I don't know if you've got the first edition.
No, I haven't. The which was only printed on one side.
That's right. They were printed only on one side on stamp paper, because they managed to find. We'll keep on that one for now. But the first batch were done on stamp paper, issued on one side only. And they were rushed out to all the high street banks and everywhere. And they were in £1 denomination and 50 pence, 10 bob denominations. And as I said, today, £1 is £147. Yeah. So they were rushed out. And the bank, the August the 3rd had been a bank holiday. So we'd basically declared war just after a bank holiday. But the banks were told to remain shut. Oh, there we are. There's the £1 and the 10 shillings. Done on stamp paper, so they're only printed on one side. And as you can see, they're signed by John Bradbury, later Sir John Bradbury, later Lord Bradbury, who was the first secretary to the Treasury. And so that's why they became popularly known as Bradburys.
The Bradbury Pound.
Now, the important thing is, when people were allowed eventually back into the banks after 5 days, I think it was August the 8th, or was it 7th? Or it's 7th of the 8th, August. They were allowed back, and they were immediately told, you're not having gold, you're having these treasury notes. And they had it explained that these treasury notes are based on the wealth and the labour potential, the creativity of a nation. They stood for something firm, Britannia,
Yes.
And everyone was happy. They all went off clutching these treasury notes, and they were swapping their Bank of England ones, private bank, for real money. Now, the principle of the Bradbury is called M for money, M0, okay? And we still practice M0 in the Treasury. It's M0 at, I think it's something like 2.3%. And those are the coins in your pocket.
Ah.
Yeah, all the coinage in your pocket. £1 coins, 50p, 10p, 5p, 2p, 1p, all those there, this is the shrapnel in our pockets, as we call it. That is Treasury M0 at 2.3%. It may drop now because they're trying to get us into a cashless society. Now, brilliant. And of course, it's all done through the Royal Mint, and it's all very honourable. But of course, you look at your notes, and have you got a note in your pocket, or is that going to disturb the moths?
No. No, I keep taking notes out the bloody bank at the moment to try and...
Yeah, well, we're all trying to stock up a little. Now you're going to read the strap line on it. What are you going to read on the strap line?
Right, where shall we... Which particular strap line? The one I promised to pay the bearer. God, they've made it so small now. I promised to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20 on this particular one.
Yeah, well, if you want a bit of fun, take that along to the Bank of England and ask for some gold. Good luck.
Could I have my gold, please?
Yeah, the point is that is the fake money. That is your fiat money. It's not based on anything. It is just our so-called confidence. I mean, money. What is it they say? Money is money. What is it? Definition of money? Money is a unit. What is it? A unit of what is it? A convenient unit of exchange for goods and services that people have complete confidence in. Okay,
Yes.
and that is essentially what it's a unit of exchange that people have complete confidence in to buy goods and services. Now, bottom line is, with what's coming, there is going to be a financial collapse because they want a cashless society. So they really want economic chaos. So they can justify bringing in the central bank digital currencies. We know that. They know that we know that. But nonetheless, a lot of people, a huge number of people, don't know that.
No.
And if you want proof that people don't understand money creation and money supply, I always have fun with this. I always ask the first MP I meet. I've asked 22, I think I was trying to work it out the other day. I think it's between 20 and 25 MPs. I've actually talked to them direct, including my current MP. And the first question, having said good morning to them or good afternoon in a nice, pleasant way, I always ask them, what can you tell me about the Bank for International Settlements? And the answer is nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, the Bank for International Settlements is the central bank for all the central banks. It creates over 95% of the world. Put it this way, it oversees over 95% of the world's money. It directly controls 63 central banks, including the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, and the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Russia, the Bank of China, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Italy, the Bank of France, and all the rest of them. Okay. All the other central banks who are not direct members are clearly influenced. And all the rules and regulations for good, sound banking and stress testing banks, etc., are done by the Bank for International Settlements. And I often say to people, how can a bank go bust if they can create money out of thin air, okay? And all the rules and regulations are passed by the Bank for International Settlements, which, of course, is at the center of the globalists' ambition. You've got the World Economic Forum, the Bank for International Settlement. These are the linchpins of the Great Reset, the fake Green New Deal, and all the other stuff that's coming. Now, if you want to defeat this mindset, the mindset of the criminal globalists, it's very simple. You do what we did with the Bradbury Pound. And myself and Sir Julian Rose at the Hardwick Alliance, we wrote a very polite letter to the Prime Minister, an open letter, saying, look, if we could do this in 1914 to save the British economy from collapse, why can't we do it today?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to answer that question. No MP in Parliament wants to answer that question. In fact, they're like scared rabbits in headlights. The bottom line is the City of London has their man sitting with the RMPs. He's called the City Remembrancer. That position was first created in 1581. He's there to look after the privileges of the of the City of London. In fact, it's even mentioned in the Great Charter of 1215. But they've extended their privileges to really control Parliament, because there's no ifs and buts about this. Politicians are not allowed to question money creation and money supply. They've just got to accept it as it is. It's fascinating. And they don't want to discuss the Bradbury Pound. They don't want to even mention it. As far as the political class is concerned, what happened in August 1914 to save the British economy from collapse, which it did brilliantly, is being airbrushed out of history. They don't want people to discuss it. And they can't discuss it because the logic is so plain. If it worked in 1914, why can't it work now?
So kind of what you're saying is that they're permanently or they're purposefully um, looking the other way when there is a solution right at hand that we could implement,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
they're choosing not even to engage with it or even to let
Absolutely.
the
Yep.
public know that there is even a choice.
Exactly. Let's have a public discussion. Let's have a debate. Now, the mainstream economists will say, oh, it's rubbish. You're just going to print money. Hyperinflation will come. Oh, I've heard it all over the last 10 years. And a lot of the economists, they have absolutely no idea. They're obviously well paid and, they've on
Mm.
these universities and they just don't want to discuss it.
But
But
if
you
it's a
think
choice,
about it.
if it's a choice between that and this communist style, China
Well,
style type of money that
yeah,
will enslave really all of
exactly.
us.
Exactly. Central bank digital currencies totally controlled by private. I mean, this is the key. Now, this is the key, but I want everyone to take on board.
Mm.
All the mainstream economists cannot accept this one overbearing, fact.
Mm.
The entire financial system of the world is in private, unelected, unaccountable hands. The hands of people who meet in absolute secrecy. The Bank for International Settlements, every 4, 5, 6 weeks, has a meeting of the top governors of the banks.
Mm.
And they meet in absolute secrecy. And they have the big banking families and so forth, they all meet up. The
Mm.
minutes are never made available. And they decide on the money creation and the money supply of the world. But none of us are allowed to know anything about it.
So how do we combat this though? Because if there is
Well,
this solution, how do we enforce a
by
government that?
everybody talking about the Bradbury Pound and the fact that we call it sovereign money. I mean, it's sovereign money, because which would people rather have?
Well, this is it.
Money that is created and controlled by secretive, unelected, unaccountable people in secret, or money that is created by us, the people, through our elected representatives at whatever level. It could be at centralized government level, even at local level. I mean, the little island of Guernsey practiced sovereign money at one stage. Even the city of Liverpool practiced it in the 1780s or 1790s, during the first part of the Revolutionary Wars. There are episodes. I mean, as I said before, the colonial script for a colony. It's what people want. The point is, none of us, should have food banks in our communities. None of us should have people really suffering financially. We
Right.
should have our infrastructure looked after, our services, our schools, our education, our health, the police, proper community policing, all these things that we need to have a prosperous and happy community, we're being stopped from having because there isn't enough money. Well, I've got news for everybody. This country, according to the Office of National Statistics, is worth in the region of around £30 trillion, 30, 31, 32 trillion pounds. Quite easily, the government could put debt-free, interest-free money into the economy to the tune of probably £1.5, £2 trillion. And that would sort out your hospitals and your NHS. It would sort out your education, the schools. You wouldn't have students having to pay for their education and all the rest of it. Sort out our military and police. It would, I mean, I can go through the list.
So this money in the past was used as a temporary measure.
Yes,
For
temporary. I'll tell you the story of that.
Yeah, hold on a second. We're,
Yeah.
we're running out of time. We're about 30 minutes in. We want to
Okay.
keep this short.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was a temporary measure. Are you suggesting that if we were to implement, if enough people were talking about and asking their MP and making it very public that we know that there is another mechanism, we don't have to go down the central bank digital currency,
Yep.
that they talk incessantly about what is this thing, the Bradbury Pound, would that be a temporary solution or more long term?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not an economist. I had my sort of, I call jokingly, the Richard Hannay moment. I suddenly was given this information.
Right.
I've come across something which is clearly the big secret. I was told it was the big secret they don't want discussed.
Yeah.
I think far cleverer people than me will be able to take up the challenge.
Right.
Because I've had some people say to me, yes, as a firefighting mechanism, this is brilliant. Maybe for the long term, we'll have to look and see other possibilities. I would accept that.
Yes.
What
Anything
I
if
don't-
it fights off the
Yeah.
central bank digital
This
currency.
is just certainly as a firefighting measure, no other school of economics can tackle it. Look, the Austrian school, the Keynesian school, no one. If there was a collapse tomorrow, they would not have an immediate solution to stop it. Vista Bradbury stopped things in 1914. It can do the same again. And I think people want money to be in public hands. It wants to be, transparent and fully
and private.
Yeah. And people should be allowed to, exactly, privacy of being able to. They don't want a central bank with all the artificial intelligence and
snooping in. No, who wants that?
Controlling us. No, we're free. We're sovereign beings. We should be free to conduct our affairs in private. If we
so sovereign money is an obvious no-brainer.
Exactly. And of course, going back to 1914, just very quickly, they phased it out. Having saved the bankers, having saved them from collapse,
yes,
they went running back to David Lloyd George, who then agreed to phase the Bradbury gradually out, but allowed the bankers to buy bonds from the government at 3.5%. It went up to 4.5%, which meant the bankers made a killing out of the killing at the end of the First World War. This is their money, not our money now. This is their money at the time. The national debt was £650 million in 1914. By the time of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, it had gone up to 7,500 million. And if you multiply that by 147, I did it today, it's over £1 trillion national debt. And the whole national debt, bear in mind, it was started by the Bank of England in 1694, I believe, under the common law, is unlawful. And we've only got to get a jury of randomly selected people to see the criminality behind the national debt and the central banking system that was introduced in 1694 to annul it. I mean, the common law constitution, as William Keater said, is a very, very powerful tool, and you use it for where the truth is needed and where for justice is needed. So, that's something that's something else that can be put into the mix. But if we're going to be faced with a sudden economic collapse now, then we've got to demand that our MPs do what their MPs did in 1914. Only this time, it's not to save the bankers, it's to save the people.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Now, you've put together an ebook, and it's not quite ready, but because the information is so important, you want to get it out as quickly as possible.
This is crucial. I apologize to people. It is not. I'm literally finishing it off today. I was going to launch it in about 2 weeks' time, get it all looking nice and professional looking or what have you. What you're going to get is something that's pretty amateurish. But the information is crucial. And this information has got to go viral everywhere. People have got to talk about it. Even conventional economists have got to talk about it because it is something that worked in 1914 and it could work again today. But they don't want anyone to know about it. This is the crux of the whole thing. Parliament doesn't want to debate it. And we saw how they treated Andrew Bridgen just the other day.
We did. Democracy died on the 17th of March.
Two people said that to me today. That was the day that democracy died. And when you saw MPs telling the others, come on, out, Andrew, get it out. And he was just left there with one friend, what's his name? I've forgotten his name now. Christopher Chope. He stood by him. He had three people on the front bench. You had one MP behind them, a woman MP behind them. But on the opposition benches, completely empty, totally empty. Now, we know that Andrew Bridgen is onto something. We know that people are, things are happening. So, he, all credit to him. I used to say I couldn't trust any MP in Parliament. I've got to know Andrew now over the phone and stuff. I do trust him.
Right. Absolutely. Listen, I'm going to have to draw it because if this goes on too long, people won't watch the video because they'll think it's too long. And this has been very, very important. So we will put the link to the information in the description here. I also put it on my website, richardvobes.com, but it will also appear on the Hardwick Alliance website. I'll put a link to that as well. And in time you'll get it more formatted. So
and I say I apologise for the amateurish appearance of this document. And we are going to make it look much better. But the information is just so important. and it has been airbrushed
Yeah.
out of history. We've got to make it go mainstream.
And if we can get some images, if we can scan some images of the Bradbury Pound that people can tweet
Yeah,
out on
yeah,
Twitter
yeah,
and put onto Facebook and say, why can't we have this? And
exactly.
get some memes going and all those sort of things. And people can make their own memes, because this could be
Yeah.
a life and death moment for how we have money.
Well,
Um,
as I said, my wife is helping with a food table in the church, and I
and
have seen some
terrible.
pathetic sights, and I
Yeah.
don't want to see those.
Okay. So, Justin, thank you very much. As we say, this
Thank
was
you,
an
Richard.
alert. We can
Thank you
talk
very
about
much.
this a little bit more, but as it's time is precious to get the information out, let's get this rolling now and challenge the bankers on
Yeah,
how we
and
want to have
the
our money.
politicians.
And indeed, the politicians.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Justin. Do check out the links and get talking about this, because if you don't want to have a central bank, if you don't want to be like China and have your credit score based on everything you say or do or how far you've travelled, then we need a private sovereign-based currency, and the Bradbury Pound seems to be the best thing on offer. So take care, tune in again, and from us, thanks, bye-bye.